You don't work, you don't eat. We have to take care of our own first. I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. Why can't they? Well, one that I heard growing up in Texas a lot. You made your bed, now lie in it. These are quotes that are making the rounds on social media, the talking head shows, and the podcasts. You've all heard them. But I'm not here to debate these statements. What I am here to discuss is this in line with what Jesus taught us? Is this what Jesus would want us to do? Is this something that would make Jesus proud of us? In our reading, in the verses just before this story, Jesus is across the Jordan River in a region called Perea. It's just outside of the Judean territory, just far enough to be safe. You ask, why would it need to be safe? Well, you see, the tensions between the religious leaders and Jesus have been rising, and they've already tried to stone him once. So Jesus has taken some space for his own safety and for the safety of his disciples. It is there in Perea that the message reaches Jesus that Lazarus is very, very sick. He doesn't live nearby. He lives in Bethany, which is a day's journey from where Jesus is. And Bethany is just 2 miles from Jerusalem, well within the Judean territory and right under the watchful eyes of the religious leaders who want Jesus dead. Now, according to the story, Jesus doesn't leave right away. He waits 2 days. But eventually, Jesus does go, as he knows that he is still walking into dangerous territory. And by the time he arrives in Bethany, Lazarus has been dead for 4 days, which means that Lazarus likely died only hours after the messenger was sent to Jesus. The scene is heavy with grief. Mary, Martha, Lazarus' sisters, are both devastated. They both say the same thing: Lord, if you had been here, he wouldn't have died. And in the greatest exemplified moment of what it is to be a man, Jesus wept. He walks to the tomb, requests the stone be rolled away, even though the smell would have already started to set in. And then standing outside the grave, he cries out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" Lazarus does. This is usually where the sermons and the commentaries stop. Jesus has power over death. It's a beautiful illustration. It's a beautiful story that demonstrates it quite plainly. But there is more to this story than you think. I want you to take a very close look at verse 44. Notice Jesus said to them, "Unbind him." Now, funeral binding during that time would have been strips of linen cloth wrapping the body, and the hands and the feet would be tied separately. A separate face binding to keep the jaw closed would be separate. Lazarus would not have exactly been walking out of that tomb. He would have barely been hobbling out of that tomb. But I find it very interesting that Jesus, after resurrecting Lazarus, turns to the community and says, I'm paraphrasing, finish the miracle. The miracle of life and resurrection is God's, but the unbinding, that is the responsibility of the community. Jesus did not snap his fingers and make the grave clothes disappear. He doesn't tell Lazarus to pull himself up by his bootstraps and shake him off himself. He looks to the people standing nearby, family, friends, the neighbors, the ones who did the binding, and says, unbind him. Bindings are not just strips of cloth around a corpse, are they? No, bindings hold the living in its death grip as well. They can be from culture, from family, from shame and guilt and fear. Yes, even the church as well. They come from the stories that we tell each other, our children, and ourselves. They come from the wounds that were given to us by others and that we give ourselves and never let heal. They come from generations of trauma and exclusion, and some turn and expect the ache of these wounds to just disappear, or would rather cover them up because they're unsightly and uncomfortable to look at. The smell of death permeates these bindings because they are designed to do just that, to hold death in. But resurrection, both literal and metaphorical, is the realm of Jesus, and he does his part freely and unconditionally. So then what part do we play? We have a much slower and a much messier job. The human work of helping each other unravel death's grip so that we may live again. But don't let the messiness or the fact that it doesn't happen instantly like it did for Jesus fool you into thinking that it is any less of a miracle. It is a miracle that you and Jesus are doing together. So what does it mean in practical terms? It means that we need to learn to notice, to see when someone is still wrapped up in something that has the odor of death. Maybe it's someone struggling or in despair, thinking they are not worthy of life. Maybe it's someone who is overwhelmed with life itself. Maybe it's someone who has fooled themselves into thinking that what is bad is good, and what is hateful is Christian, and what is actually strength is somehow weakness. The smell of those death bindings may cause us to recoil, not get too close. But that is not what Jesus asked of Lazarus' community, is it? No, we are called to be miracle workers, right alongside Jesus, to bring the kingdom of heaven down here on earth. And with each miracle of resurrection that you do, we declare that these bindings of death do not belong on the body of someone that God has created. That the odor of death must not stop us from performing the messy work of those miracles. And that if we take on this communal task, Jesus is right there with us. Amen.